Together here. Good morning, everyone.
Safra Tava Lamar.
Right, Safra Tava. One of our colleagues would teach in the mornings. They always say good morning in Aramaic, which is Safra Tava. First of all, I'm sorry I wasn't here last week. I was out of town at a conference, and I'm glad that many of you learned even still. We'll do a little bit of review, and then we'll keep on going.
Wait, before you begin,
Yeah.
we have class next.
We do not have class next week.
Oh, we don't?
When the synagogue is closed, because it's President's Day, we are closed.
Okay.
Yes.
Double check.
You can learn on your own. Feel free. Okay, we're on 6B.
Actually, I'm curious as to
Yeah.
why the synagogue is closed.
All holidays, what's it called?
That makes no sense, if you don't mind my saying.
Wasn't up to me.
This is the first year. Rather
But
odd.
this is the first year. They're trying to be consistent. In any case, that doesn't necessarily impact our learning this morning.
And then until 7:30.
So we're on page 271 on 6B, and the conversation we've been having was this strange circumstance, the strange disagreement that came up by Rava already a page or two before. And so we ended up with this circumstance. We were asking the question, right, that if you look on page 271, we're in the second paragraph. We ended up with this circumstance where it says, it's possible to have 3 festivals without a year. You can find that 3 festivals can pass in half a year, between Passover and Sukkot. But a year without 3 festivals, under what circumstances can you find this case? How can a year pass without 3 festivals also passing? We had this strange circumstance of trying to figure out how, what does a year really look like? What constitutes a year? Can you have a year without 3 festivals and vice versa? And we had the conversation, according to the person who holds that festivals have to be in order, right? You can have, if you start in, if you make your vow right before Sukkot, or right before Shavuot, for example, you'd have a whole year because you go through the whole cycle until the next Sukkot, right? We'd have this whole cycle. And then we have the conversation of, okay, well, if you don't hold by that the festivals have to be in order, what do we do? And we got into this conversation in the next paragraph of, well, perhaps we're counting the solar calendar, which is 365 days, versus a Jewish calendar without a leap year, then a Jewish calendar with a leap year. We end up with, I have my notebook here if we need, multiple lengths of the year, such that it would be possible that we would have a year without 3 festivals. Everybody with me so far? Okay. And then what you read last week was this paragraph, the second paragraph from the bottom on page 271, right? And this whole discussion about this idea of this solar year comes from the use of a verse in Leviticus within the space of a full year. So we asked the question, what's a full year? A solar year. All right? I'm just reviewing where we've been. We haven't been full. So then, on page 271, it says, and the rabbis disagree and say, one counts 12 months from day to day, from date of the sale, in the context of selling something. This is Rosh Omrim. From the date of the sale into the same date 12 months later, right? Because the context of the verse is that when you live in a walled city, you have to use and selling your property. And if it is a leap year with an added month, the leap month is for the seller's benefit. That is, that person has 13 months to redeem their house. So as opposed to being at 12 months regardless of the leap year, the fact there's a leap year just is extra bonus. Doesn't hurt. You can find a year without 3 festivals according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. How so? It is possible in a case where one consecrated an animal after the festival of Passover, so that once that person reaches the end of the 2nd month of Adar, in a leap year, the year is completed, but the festivals are not yet completed, as the 3rd festival is still to come. Meaning to say, right, if I do it after Pesach, a whole year might have come by and I haven't had Pesach again, right? Or I haven't gotten Pesach the first time.
12 months.
12 months,
Right, and
right?
then the question is...
Does that count as a
right,
year?
because you're essentially not counting the 13th month as part of the year, which of course it is because it's a leap year, except that it's not because a year is 12 months.
Exactly right. Exactly right. That's the whole subtlety. Is everybody with that? Okay. No? Okay.
Shaking my head,
that was a general shaking, not a specific shaking.
Understand that a year is 12 months, and yet sometimes it's 13 months, and we just pretend that it's not.
Right, or all of them have a truth, right? We hold all of them at some point. So then the question is asked, but according to the sages, under what circumstances can you find this case of a year without 3 festivals? Let's just take a moment and step back and understand that question. Right, if you take out the first 5 words in English, but according to the sages, we've already answered this question. We've answered this question more than once.
Yeah.
So it's important for us to recognize that we're talking about attribution here. Whose opinion? According to whom are we holding? And so then the question, which we have not yet answered, is the sages. What do they think? And why, when we say the sages, why is that relevant?
Because they're the ones who have had the discussions over the centuries and determined, at least give us a framework for deciding how to operate.
So yes, I'm looking for a more technical answer, but yes, also that.
Oh, because
right?
we want to know the individuals?
Well, so we've gotten some of the individuals. When it says the sages, it means the majority. Who, right? But you're right in the sense that we want to know the sages because they've done the work of exploring this. We want to know what individuals think because they've clearly shared an opinion. But we have not yet heard, according to this question, is what do most of the sages seem to say?
Which is always a neat moment on a meta scale, in that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is the editor of the Mishnah, and therefore, if he had wanted, he very easily could have said, and the only correct opinion is this, and I'm not recording the other guy's opinion because it's garbage anyways. But he doesn't do that. He literally significantly points out, I say this, and everybody disagrees with me, which is kind of neat.
Well, and it's also, I think, at the next level, he takes the privilege of publishing his dissenting opinion, right? Instead of simply saying, here's what everybody thinks. Right? He's the editor. He gets to put in his dissenting opinion.
Which shows how important this dissent is, because he probably could have done that every single time, and he doesn't choose to.
It's interesting to think that maybe any of the sages ever agreed to get a majority.
There you go.
Realistically, I don't think we've ever read anything where 2 of them agreed completely.
There's a thing in the Gemara in Sanhedrin where it says that on the Sanhedrin,
Which is, define a
the legal body that not only voted on cases in case a court case came to them in a large case, but also voted on laws, essentially.
Kind of like a Supreme Court, if you will.
Yeah.
Sort of, but not really.
Right, the Sanhedrin was both the legislative and the judicial body at the same time, and sometimes did more of one and sometimes did more of the other. But anyways, in a case, according to Sanhedrin, in a case in which something came before them and all 71 judges agreed unanimously to a thing, they didn't do it that way because they were sure that something was wrong with the case.
They hadn't unpacked it.
Exactly.
Something had gone
a lot
wrong.
of sense.
Yeah.
But it's an important thing for us to recognize, right? Not to get lost perhaps in a mob mentality, which is not what you're describing, but that if we really all agree, it means that, first of all, like we missed something. Yeah. That's really essential. Cindy, what were you going to say?
I was going to go back to Yehuda Hanassi having the privilege of redacting, essentially. But what's really interesting is that he actually did a lot. I mean, a lot of things were not originally included and get brought back in by someone else's barisa, right? So he really actually did.
Right. Not everything is in there.
Absolutely. And then the rest of the rabbis did not allow that to happen. So that actually happened in the commentary period, not in the original period.
Right. So that's a really good point.
Period, he was pretty strict.
Right. Yehuda Hanassi is the editor of the Mishnah, which is very, very much an edited document.
Right.
And the Talmud, also an edited document, right? Different layers on top of each other, seeks to kind of rebalance power in some sense. And I would say that every time we say the sages, we should read, this is what the majority. Right, so even though it may not have made, maybe I didn't point it out like that, but we should read it that way.
Just one quirk in the translation. At the beginning of that paragraph, right, it says the Chachamim Omrim, right, and Rabbi Steinsaltz translates as the rabbis, and then at the end of the paragraph it's Ele Rabbanan, which he then translates as the sages, where of course Rabbanan
You would
would
think
be
just the opposite, right?
Exactly.
It's a really good point. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's interesting. I'm not sure that I know exactly what the difference is between those. That's a good question. Okay, so we get to the answer, or presumed answer, and I want to just point us to something in the Aramaic, since Rabbi Stein did such an important point here. First off, it says kiditane, the first word. The last three words should look familiar, 3 letters should look familiar. It should look like Tanya, or Ditanya. Tane means it's taught in a Baraita, or right, that it's coming from that period of time. Then if you look at the last 2 words on the second line, it says Ha Ketzad question mark. This is translated as how so? How does this work? Okay, those are the 2 words I want to point out. The Gemara answers.
When was the question mark added? When was the question mark?
The question mark itself? Far after this.
I would say, there have been other volumes that are translated, but realistically only when it was translated.
Like in the last few hundred years.
Okay,
right?
so
the original
the
text
vowels and the
also don't exist.
The original text doesn't point to
So that's why it's important to know these words, because when you read Ha Ketzad in the middle of a line with no punctuation, it's telling you that it's a question. That's why these words pointing out are so important. It's because there is no punctuation. If you look at a standard Vilna Shas page, it doesn't have any punctuation.
There are no periods, there are no commas.
Nope.
The only type of punctuation that is in a standard Vilna Shas page, this does have punctuation.
It does?
Yeah.
Look at that.
The standard, the standard Vilna, the only type of punctuation it has is 2 dots, like a colon, at the end of a section.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, even in English, there's certain words it's coming out the question.
Correct.
You see the how, the where, the what. You know you're getting a question.
Exactly. So that's what this is as well. Okay, the Gemara answers. As Rav Shemaiah taught in a Baraita, Shavuot sometimes occurs in the 5th month of Sivan.
On the 5th.
On the 5th of Sivan, sometimes on the 6th of Sivan, and sometimes on the 7th. How so? If both of the months of Nisan and Iyar are full months, right? So we know what we learn, and if we read the note on the background on the right side, we learn that the year, the months alternate 30 and 29 days. So sometimes some months are one, and sometimes some months are the other. So if both the months of Nisan, the one with and the Iyar, are full months of 30 days each, the festival of Shavuot, which is celebrated 50 days after the 2nd day of Passover, and therefore is conditional on Passover and not the days of the month, then it occurs on the 5th of Sivan. If both months are short and 29 days each, it occurs on the 7th of Sivan. If one of them is full and the other is short, it occurs on the 6th of Sivan. So therefore, Steinsaltz explains this to us. According to this opinion, if both months were full and the festival of Shavuot occurred on the 5th day of Sivan, and one made a vow on the day after Shavuot, which is the 6th of Sivan, and the following year both months were short, so that the festival of Shavuot occurred on the 7th of Sivan, a whole year would have passed without 3 festivals.
Who remembers the problem with this that we talked about last time?
Yeah, please.
As they made all these little circles on how many days are in really short and full and whatever.
The problem is that in the way the Jewish calendar works, right, Nisan and Sivan are fixed length. Adjustment is in the winter time with Teshvan and Kislev.
So at least theoretically half.
Right. Well, so the point is that the time between Pesach and Shavuot is fixed at 50 days, but also right? It's actually fixed. It's always on the 6th because those months do not vary as Rav Shemaya was.
So here's a really important thing for us to understand. So first off, let's just make clear we understand what you're saying because it's really valuable, which is at this point, these months don't change length. This argument is moot. But we learned something else that's really important. Two things. One is what we're talking about in terms of a full year and how we're talking about 1 day difference, right? That's really small. And this is probably what the one example they can come up with. It means that it's really hard to find. So that's the first thing. The second thing we learned is maybe at the point when Rav Shemaya was teaching this, the calendar wasn't set yet.
Or the months
Which months?
Vary.
Right. So we learned something really valuable about the process of this calendar becoming solidified. In Rav Shemaya's day, my guess is it wasn't as solidified as it was today. It had that flexibility. I think that's a really powerful recognition of how things change, how certain things calcify and certain things don't. Just a kind of meta sense about learning, not just learning Talmud, but learning about Talmud. Everybody with me? Okay, we're going to turn the page.
If we're turning the page so quickly, we probably didn't do a good enough job.
right. So,
Go back to the other paper to begin
right.
with.
As my teacher, Rabbi Patricia Fenton, always said, review is where the real learning happens. So review. All right, we're now on page 272. We're still on 6b, kind of right in the center there. And now we're going to point out a couple of good Aramaic words. Mark, do you want a copy that you can have next to you?
Nah, that's
Okay.
suckers.
All right.
All right, I'm feeling like a sucker. That's it.
No, I like making this unbelievably difficult upon myself because I'm an idiot.
It's good that it's a good lesson that sometimes we take stringencies on ourselves that are not required on everybody. Okay.
Perfect.
So if you take the first line, I'm going to pull out a couple of good Aramaic words that we'll start to learn. So first is the word man. Mem, Aleph, Nun. That is the word who. Man, who, and then the next word is Tana, which is what? It's not quite a Baraita. Yes. Specifically, it is the rabbi of that category. We're talking about the person, right? Because the first word is who. So who is the Tana? Who is the rabbi of that period, the Mishnah and Baraita? Who is that rabbi? The next word is dipaleg, or phaleg. That root, phaleg, is disagree. So when you see that word, you know that pligi or phaleg or maflig, all the versions of that word, all mean disagreement.
And look at these notes and say, what did I do?
Exactly. Now, if you look at the word that's directly below that, it's ditanya, which we know means we're going to introduce a baraita. And I think those are all the words I want to point out. You'll notice that there's a couple of ains in there. This is not and this is not. Yeah, actually we are going to point that out. So if you look at the last word on that line, the second line, you see the word ain. Then the next line, about the fourth word in, you see another ain. Then you see the word ella, the fourth line, third word. Everybody with me? Aleph, Lamed, Aleph. So there is a construction, ein ella, that means only. Now I'm not sure, right? We're not sure, looking at this on this light way, whether or not this will be that construction because there's an extra ein in there. But it's valuable for us to know that it might be coming. Everybody with me? Okay. Can I get a volunteer to read for us in English this paragraph? Go for it.
Well, there we go. The Gemara comments. And who is the Tana who disagrees with Rav Shemaya and says that Edir has a fixed number of days? It is Acherim, as it's taught in the Baraisa. Acherim say the difference between Shavuos of one year and Shavuos of the following year, and similarly between Rosh Hashanah of one year and Rosh Hashanah of the following year is only 4 days of the week. There are 354 days in a lunar year, which are divided into 12 alternating months. 6 months that are 30 days and 6 months that are 29 days long. Therefore, every year is 50 weeks and 4 days long. And if it were a leap year, in which case the year is composed of 383 days, or 54 weeks and 5 days, there's a difference of 5 days between them.
Okay. So this language is a little strange because it doesn't seem clear what the argument is, right? It's a statement of facts. So what is the implied argument here?
So he starts off by asking who's the Tana who says that the year is fixed. But then he goes on to talk about how the year's not fixed, really.
Well,
It's back to the same
sort
question.
of,
Where's
right?
your year,
Yeah.
where's the beginning?
So I think we could say that we affix the years. Not every year is exactly the same, but we've fixed them in the sense that not every month is it open to interpretation.
Okay.
But I think it's a fair point. That seems to be a strange contradiction.
Yeah. He's talking about leap years are different than other years.
Well,
Sure.
Essentially.
So I mean, there are a couple of things that I found interesting, right? One of which is the fact that here they're talking about the year being fixed. And again, in the modern Jewish calendar, it's not, right? Because sometimes you need an extra day to keep Yom Kippur from falling on Friday or a Sunday, right? So there are some of those considerations that the rabbis instituted. So that suggests, one, this is a disagreement about whether the year varies in length or not, in addition to the historical fact of when does that variation get introduced. But it's also interesting to me that it says, right, that who is it that disagrees? It's acherim.
Which is interesting,
Which means others, right? And so I suspect that if we were to look in the context of the Baraita, so-and-so expresses an opinion, and others say, there's a divergent opinion. And so here they're treating this as a person named acherim, but I suspect in the original context is here's a group of people who express this opinion.
Right. So it's sort of strange to see. We ask the question, who is this person that's disagreeing with Rav Shemaya? Those guys. Right? It's not being named, which says something. I think the implied argument here, right, just to kind of tie the bow in our full conversation here, is that this is impossible. This whole year thing, where we're trying to get this whole year without 3 festivals, doesn't actually work. We have to find the tiniest random circumstances to make this work. It's a fixed year. Leap years are years. They count. And I say this because if we look at the note at the top left, it says, some explain that this is a general question. Who is the Tana who says that there are a fixed number of days in the year and a fixed number of days in each month? However, Rashi and other commentaries, however, understand the question as follows. Who is the Tana in the Baraita who does not mention the case of a year without 3 festivals? This implies that he holds that such a case is impossible.
So basically our acherim here are disagreeing with the sages, naming the majority. Go back to
They're
where-
disagreeing with
Rav Shemaya as an individual.
So if we go back one page,
Sounds like a problem.
it's really confusing, right? So we go back
It
one
is.
page,
Sounds like a
it says
problem.
Rav Shemaya taught in a Braita, and then it has the whole thing about Shavuot being plus or minus a day. That's who's being disagreed with.
Right. So the sages didn't all. They
Sages were
didn't
the
agree-
paragraph before.
I know, so they're not. The sages aren't agreeing with Shemaiah.
It seems like
It
it.
seems
but
like
it's
they
not-
were,
It
now
seems
they're not.
like it. It's not entirely clear.
Exactly.
It's
So
not
we're back
entirely-
to where we
we
started.
said, what do the sages think? And the answer was Rosh Shemaya says.
Yeah.
Right.
So it would seem.
It seems like they agreed with him, and that was
100%.
where they decided to compromise and do
Right.
it. But now we have this group that
and
doesn't agree.
right, not only that, but this group isn't named,
Right.
which to me means that they don't hold as much weight.
Others.
They're just those guys, right? Meaning to say that
No matter
perhaps
what
Rav
you
Shemaya
decide,
did
there's always
represent.
somebody that disagrees.
Well,
Go
that's
back to
certainly
where we
true,
started.
right?
So my question, before we allow ourselves to get diverted, is there a clear answer as to whether 3 festivals, whether you can not have 3 festivals in a year?
So the answer is yes and no.
Basically, if you're going to promise or do something, pull out your Jewish calendar, mark the date, and then follow that around for the next year. And
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. So I was only being a little facetious. So right, it depends on how you hold. So if you hold that the festivals have to be in order, then yes, this answer is simple. Yes, it's possible. If you make a commitment, right, such that you have to, that Passover goes all the way through the year. So if you do it before Shavuot, then you have a full year, right, where you have, that's where you have more festivals than a year, something along those lines, where you have lots of festivals. A year can pass. Hold on.
So the legal significance of the question is not, it's not sitting firmly with me anyway, but I'm okay with that as an answer.
The case, I'm going to simplify for my purposes. If this helps you in no way, I apologize. The case in which a person could observe a 1 year of being maybe Zocha, the punishment of Baal Tacha or whatever that is, they could observe 1 year but not follow 3 festivals, is a leap year in which they observe the festivals of Sukkot, Shavuot, Sukkot, and they don't get to Pesach because it's a 13-month year, but they've gone through 12 months. That's the one case in which they could be okay by one person's standard and not okay by another person's standard. And that's why Jeremy said yes and no.
Right, because it depends on who you hold by.
Right.
Right, so another example in another context.
Which is probably why, sorry.
That's okay.
I find all of this digression crazy in the sense that, like, we were pretty good 2 pages ago when we were talking about, like, yeah, and if you go over 3 festivals, you're good. And then we get into, oh, wait, what about a year? And it's like, what about a year? Since when do we care about counting days? And I'm, like, blown away that, like, they care suddenly. Because they do.
So what we're looking at, I think, is a little bit of a tangent, right? Because the rabbis are discussing this question of what qualifies as delay, and then they bump into this question and says, oh, a year, 3 festivals, and now somebody comes along and says, well, wait a minute, how do you count a year?
I'll get to it.
Right? And so I think that there are these 2 different questions that are coming up here. One is, right, is the year fixed in length, or might it vary from year to year? Not counting leap years, but just a regular year, a leap year might have a day discrepancy 1 year from one year to the next, right? Which we know is how we do it today. It may have been under debate back then. The second question is, when you count a year, are you counting, again, the solar year, 12 lunar months, or the Jewish year, 12 or 13 months? And I think when we look at Rashi's opinion from the note, Rashi is much more practical in some sense, right? So he's saying, instead of getting bogged down in these details, right, a year is the Jewish year, which might be 13 months, and therefore you can't have a year without 3 festivals, because by definition, right, the year has all 3 festivals in it. Which is still a different question then, do they have to be in order? But I think what Rashi's talking about is not so much the question of delay and festivals in order, he's talking about the calendar. Right? He's basically saying a year is when you count the year, right? And stop getting into the details that are maybe useful as an academic exercise, but don't address the practical issue.
So I'm getting back to your point. But I wasn't planning on going here, but there seems to be an interest. And reminding the group that the question of the length of a year came up in the context of a vow, presumably whether the vow doesn't really exist. And there's a technicality that hasn't been completely closed regarding this, but to me, it's not really relevant. Because if you make a vow and you found a technicality that allows you to get out of the vow,
Interesting.
it's still a technicality, and I don't really think that we want to go there. But it may be that this discussion is of some importance for some other reason, which I don't know about at this point.
The technicality is, I'll put a personal experience upon it. The technicality has to do with this phrase, what rabbi are you holding by? So when I was the mashgiach of the day school in Denver, there was an incident that happened over a weekend where the caterer who was in charge of food service did something that was not in the rules. And did not inform any of the mashgiachim, and there was no mashgiach present.
And mashgiach is someone who
The
does kosher
kosher
supervision.
over supervisor. And my head of the Judaic Studies department, who was like co-mashgiach with me and had preceded me as mashgiach, was furious and was like, "We got to get blowtorches. We got to go in the kitchen. We got to suspend food service for 3 days. We got to." He was like livid. And I was like, "Where are you basing that on?" He was like, "Well, the Vada Rabbanim the Vada Kashrut of Denver would never do that." And I'm like, "We're not holding by the Vada Kashrut of Denver. We're holding by me and you. We're the mashgichim for the school. So let me suss out what violation, if any, was done, and then we will figure out." I would say, to what you were saying, that's not us being lenient and falling upon a technicality in order to get out of blowtorching the entire kitchen. That's, us doing our due diligence of like, we're the authority by which we hold. But when you get your point is really valid in the sense that when we're reading the Talmud 1,000 years after it was written, more than 1,000 years after it was written, we do have to choose which one of these opinions we get to pick, as opposed to saying like, well, Jeremy and I disagree, but you don't go to Jeremy's synagogue, so you're out of luck.
So, but we have more flexibility than that. We can come up with our own opinion, which may not
Right.
be in Talmud.
Right. In the modern Jewish postmodern thinking world, yes.
So I think I think
Just trying to bring it back.
No, I think I don't think I have anything better to say than what you said before. I think the only piece for us to recognize in the conversation of why study this, of spending the time, like why was this tangent worth spending time on? Right?
Thought process.
It's exactly. It's to your point, which is this is about training. This is our montage. This is the climbing the steps in Philly before the boxing match, right? This is about learning to Talmud. It's not just about learning Talmud, it's learning to Talmud. And so the tangent is valuable for us in an understanding, perhaps there was someone who was very concerned, right? Not with festivals, but with years. Mm-hmm. And therefore it was really valuable for us to say, look, if you hold by Joe Schmo, then you're fine, then you're fine. If you hold by Jane Schmo, you've got a different issue, right? It's really important to recognize that we live in context, right? Not objectively.
Using Mark's example, if you want to know if something's kosher, you can do something, you choose which rabbi you ask. Because
Oh boy, do we get different rules, don't we?
Wait, so I just want to speak to that for 1 second, which is, yes, you get to choose, and we live in a time in which there are lots of rabbis
Lots of levels
and
of
a lots of different ways of navigating it, and all of them are good. But I do think it's important, and I think the rabbis, the Talmud would agree, which is we want to strive for consistency, right? Not what is easiest. Meaning to say, if I'm going to say I hold by Rav Shmaya, then I'm going to try my best to hold by Rav Shmaya, at least in this context. And not to say, well, Rav Shmaya says something I'm not super jazzed by. I'm going to go by Achirim this time.
But you can make
Right?
it easier too when you make your original
Never ask
vow.
rabbis anything.
Well, no, when you make your original vow or promise, don't say following 3 holidays or following the year. Say, I will return this on the 5th day of Nisan, and that is when it's due, and I picked my date, and it doesn't matter how many days or months or whatever fell in between. This is my date that I have to do it by without being late, and that's it.
So I
it's
think-
a very explicit contract with no loophole.
Right, so the question is how you make a vow. That's a really
Exactly.
valuable question.
That's it. How do you make and if you make your vow that way, then you don't need this thought process But then you don't have this learning and you don't have...
Also, the humans aren't perfect.
The methods training is very important. Very.
It's like taxes are due the
and
15th of April, and that's it. It doesn't matter whether February he had how many...
It comes up regularly in my life.
It doesn't
And I'll give one example from an Israeli TV show that Savannah and I watched yesterday, and another example that occurred in my life a couple of years ago. But so we're watching this Israeli TV show about these religious singles, whose name I can't remember. Thank you. And in the episode we watched last night, the young unmarried woman who is no longer Orthodox took a cab to her Orthodox friend's house on Friday evening for Shabbat dinner, got out of the cab after Shabbat started with a bottle of wine. And at some point, this bottle of wine was removed from the table and a cheap bottle of sweet kosher wine came out. The woman was embarrassed. I'll just leave it there. An event that happened to me, we ordered kosher food for an event in my house on Friday night, and the food arrived 2 minutes after sundown.
Oh my God.
Well, in my house, both of these things come up for discussion, for a ruling. As Savannah and I usually don't agree on these things. I could come up with more.
Yeah, you're giving me PTSD already for many bad experiences I've had that were related to all the things you said.
That's
So
all
many bad
Rabbi
that never happened to me
his
with
stuff for my son's
So-
breast to the hospital
The
before
method-
sundown
the
on
method-
Friday, so we could have it there. and we could
Right,
have
so
it carried.
so let's be clear. Let's be clear. Conflict is inevitable. Conflict is inevitable. All of this is about when you have more than one value coming into conflict with another value. It's not that
I just
one
want
is
to know what he ate. Did you eat dinner?
Yes.
right. That, so I think so. I don't want to get into the specifics of this case, although it is valuable for us to say, right, that there are more than one value that's coming in conflict. Let's with our last about 15 minutes, let's learn a little bit.
Think of the implications, though. It goes well beyond
does.
just
It-
what happened in my house.
It's what happened in your house and everybody who was there, and your level of patience, your level of observance.
It is. This is why it's interesting to be Jewish.
And I've solved the problem by not observing all this.
To each their own.
It worked.
All right, let's learn a little bit more. I want to point out a couple of good words. We're in the second paragraph of 272. We're still on 6b for a little bit longer. The first word in our paragraph is ba'e, which is a question-asking word. In this case, it's translated as ask.
Although it really means raw. So it's like he
Yeah,
brings to the discussion.
literally.
Right. Then if you look on the third line, second and third word, it says O Dilma, which means oh, or perhaps. So we know that something is going to be stated. O Dilma. It's the second and third words on that page.
I had the wrong line.
Okay.
No problem.
O Dilma means or perhaps, meaning to say, we're going to say, we know for a fact there is going to be a question, then there's going to be an answer, and then a second answer to the question. We know this just from those three words. We know what's going to happen in this paragraph.
Nice.
Question, answer, second answer. Right? Remember, this is about training. Montage. All right. Can I get a volunteer to read? Rabbi Zera asks.
Okay, I can.
Go for it.
Rabbi Zera asks, in the case of an heir, what is the halacha with regard to the prohibition of you shall not delay?
All right, let's pause. In the case of an heir. So before we read anything else, what might be What might be this question asking?
I think
How long do
Yeah.
you have to probate the will?
I think the question is, your father promised to bring an offering and maybe died before he could bring it, and it's in the year after the promise was made, and you have inherited the debt of his promise
Well, that's
to bring
the
the
question.
animal,
Have you-
and you may be in the doubtful period of whether you can still bring it. Are you a Baltacher? Have you violated the prohibition of Baltacher or not? Which is crazy, all of that.
So do you have to wait 11 months to do it and finish?
Well, I'm sure we'll get there, but I think the question at a more basic level is, does the heir assume the liability?
It's a great question if you were to forget all the other Narishkeit that I just
No, but yes, to both of your things, which is, right, what does the relationship between our obligations, timing, and relationships all fit in together? All right, keep reading.
That is to say, does an heir transgress the prohibition against delaying a vow taken by his father? The Gemara explains two sides of the question. Is it that the merciful one states in the Torah, when you shall vow a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay paying it?
Which we should recognize because that is the basis of this whole discussion.
But dad did the vow, not the kid. And this one, the heir did not make a vow. Or perhaps...
Right, so those are the two parts. Let's be clear. One side is, a vow was made, you gotta pay it back.
What if-
And on the other side is,
The guy didn't make
the guy didn't make the vow.
And what if the heir does not have the item that the father vowed to bring? 'Cause
That's a
it's
great
not
question.
his.
Maybe it's
The
not
note-
possible
the
for
note
this person.
addresses that.
Right? Okay, let's read the rest of the paragraph and come back to the note.
Okay. Or perhaps the essence of the mitzvah is, as it says, and there you shall come, and there you shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices. And this one, the heir is obligated to come and bring his father's offerings.
Okay,
It's assuming
so
he-
one side is, an obligation was made and it needs to be paid, period. The other half is, the obligation was made by somebody else, I am not obligated to it.
The move off of the is a question.
Yeah.
The move off of the verse for the no is uvata shama is being literally interpreted as he brought and you brought the thing, and it's since he didn't bring the thing, his father brought the thing, he's off the hook. Is that the move?
No. So I think it's the two verses together, right? It translated it sort of funky, right? And you shall come, uvata shama
Yeah.
is singular. V'havietem is plural. Right? So you, the person who made the obligation, and you all are obligated to it.
Again, this is a really.
I'm reading it upside down then. So ki tidor neder is you're off the hook because it's your father who brought the offering.
Because it's singular.
And uvata shama uvahavetem shama is plural, and therefore it's on you and your kids.
I think so.
Thank you.
This is a really
Thank you.
important question.
It's
today,
not
right?
entirely clear because of the order of the argument, but I believe so.
Right, you know, somebody, God forbid, passed away. You inherit the estate, right? That's not only the credits, but also the debits, the obligations. But there are certain kinds of loans that are discharged, right? So this is
It's a reasonable question.
You know, this is, we pay a lot of lawyers a lot of money to resolve these kinds of questions today.
Yeah.
So what this is actually making me think about is the conversation we've already had about delay. We've been talking all along about delay and, you know, that there's an obligation not to delay and so on and so forth. So what it makes me think about is, why is this so important not to delay? And one of the reasons would be because you might die before you can fulfill the pledge, and then you'd really be in deep bananas, right? So, you know, to a certain extent, you know, that kind of points to the first interpretation that the heir would not necessarily be inheriting this kind of a thing. Now, we've already talked about this. You don't delay because you might die.
But what if there's no
There
heir?
are people who try really hard not to make promises unless they can keep them.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are other people who make promises and promptly forget they've made promises. The more you delay, the more likely you are to just forget.
Exactly. You know, I'm kind of wondering. I mean, I understand the educational purpose of asking the questions. Oh, is it this one or that? You know, is the heir or not? But I think we've kind of, in a way, already answered the question just by talking about the fact that not delaying is so important.
Right. So I think the difference.
Right.
I think the difference is the technical question: does someone inherit an obligation? It's not clear.
Yeah, we're clear on the
I would
question.
say
is
it's
not
pretty clear.
So wait. So would the answer be yes or no?
One question is clear, the other one is not. Right? It's clear
You can make a
that you
pledge
can't.
today and die tomorrow.
Right.
And so you don't technically delay because there was no time to fulfill it.
So for us, for example, let's also be clear about the context. This is a vow I made before God. Right? This isn't right. There are plenty of debts that when you die go to your estate and therefore your descendants. This is not just a debt.
No, it's
right?
not. Exactly.
Right. I also want to point out one important word, which is the last one of that paragraph, mechayev. That root chayav is obligated, and so I'm not asking the question. This is a question: are they obligated? Is the question. But I think you'll see this word chayav show up all the time. Shows up in the Haggadah. We are chayav to see ourselves as having come out of Egypt. Right. So we see this word a lot. You wanted to read the note.
Yes.
Let's read it. Okay. So this is the second note on the page.
Yes.
Yoresh bevel ta'acher.
Even according to the halacha, that a son is obligated by Torah law to bring the offerings owed by his father, some distinguish between the case of a father who left him ancestral land, in which case the son is obligated to bring the offerings, and the case of a father who did not leave him land, in which case the son is not obligated to bring the offerings. According to some authorities, no matter what, an heir who has not made the vow himself is not bound by the positive mitzvah to bring offerings by their required time. Right?
Context is everything.
Right. So part of the question is, did the father leave the son the means to fulfill the vow? Right. If the land goes to somebody else for whatever reason, or the land goes to pay off, somebody seizes it because they're a creditor, and the son no longer has the means. Right. He's not keeping a goat in his.
Yeah. But this is what you said originally. Maybe they don't have the thing to give anymore.
Yeah. That's good.
All right, we are not going to resolve this today. We're going to end there.
Do we ever resolve anything?
Don't resolve anything. We will meet back again in 2 weeks. So not 1 week, but 2 weeks. And good learning, everybody. Have a wonderful week, a good President's Day. I will say the following.